Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy to see so many people here. Irgendwo. Just a short introduction. If you need to get to the toilet, you must follow the passage up there. There's a door with a light on your right-hand side. And then there's drinks at the back. Franz will look after you. And there's a small donation box for the donation. So, and then now I would like to welcome Dr. Lucy Kemp to please introduce yourself.
Good evening, everybody. I first had the pleasure of meeting Lucy when she was doing her PhD. And she came to me because she needed blood samples for DNA analysis and she desperately needed a permit. That was about 6 months ago. And then we sort of met each other again a while ago when we drafted a ground hornbill species management plan in the lovely town of Katima Mulilo, of all places. And we spent a couple of days there. And then we spent the last 2 days at a lead poisoning workshop, which is another big issue that is cropping up on the horizon. It's something we don't know a lot about, but we're starting to work on it. And hopefully for our AGM, we will be able to tell you a bit more about lead poisoning. But as already said, Lucy can introduce herself, so I'll pass it on to Lucy.
Thanks. Has that echo gone? Okay, good. All right. Let me just figure out where to stand. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. Holger has been trying to make this talk happen for a while, but we keep going out via Botswana, not out via Windhoek. So I'm glad to be here finally to share some of the work that we're doing on the Southern Ground Hornbills. Try that. No? No? Well? I don't know. I stole it. It is, which is why I stole it. It's not happening here. Aha. All right. There we go. As Holger said, I'm from the Mabula Ground Hornbill project. We're based in South Africa. I lead the ground hornbill work for South Africa, and I'm the co-chair for the Hornbill Specialist Group for Africa. I'm trying to try and build capacity across the continent and create a network of hornbill interested people, I guess. This is my team, my happy team. No, that one's not working either. Which one? Sorry, the top one. Okay. Aha. All right. So I've got Kyle. He's done his PhD working in the Lowvelds in the APNR. And he did all his work on vocalizations of ground hornbills, trying to understand what they say, why they say it. Can we get individual signatures from different groups? So he's done a lot of cool work on that. Sans is my operations manager, and Tubby does all of our education outreach program. Winders is in charge of our reintroduction monitoring. Lerato can make anything happen if I need it to happen. He said to me, Lou, I love working for you because you give me a job to do and then none of the right tools to do it with, so I have to think. Elaine runs our hand rearing facility for the baby ground hornbills, and Katlego is one of our interns at the moment, and he does all of our monitoring of the WhatsApp groups. And Temba, we take to various places to bring happiness. Ground hornbills are an incredibly difficult and complex species, so there's no way one organization can do anything for this bird. So we work with a number of in situ institutions, a lot of our national and provincial national parks, but also a lot of our private reserves in South Africa. And then we go through to the ex situ side, working with all of our captive institutions in South Africa, trying to understand from the birds that we do have in captivity, you know, how can we jumpstart our learning? Because trying to study these birds in the wild, everything takes a lot of time. And then in terms of the actual research, the more we learn, the more we find we don't know enough. They keep throwing curveballs at us. Every time we think we've figured them out, they do something weird and different, and we're back to the drawing board. So there are 2 species of ground hornbills on the African continent. These are ours. They're listed as endangered in South Africa, Namibia. Eswatini is down to 3, one group of 3, so that's basically extinct. And I think also at the top of the range, we're in really deep trouble. At present, we think just Tanzania and Zambia have stable populations, but all the other populations seem to be on their way out. Then we've got this incredibly beautiful bird, the northern or Abyssinian ground hornbill, which occurs north of the equator. And amazingly, in 2024, there's not a single scientific paper published about this bird. There's 3 or 4 papers about their cultural importance, but not a single thing that helps us understand their biology, and so we can understand what we could be doing for them in terms of conservation. They face all of the same threats as ours, but they also have the bushmeat trade in West Africa, so there's an additional threat there. So I have 2 students in Ghana in Mole National Park starting to look at this, but when they got up there, we've done 2 field seasons, and all we found is an entirely adult population. 2 years in the field, we can't find a single nest or a single juvenile. It's just a bunch of adults wandering around in the bush. So we've got a lot of work to do for that one. The southerns, however, we do know a lot about. They're a top order predator. I think most importantly, they're really incredibly culturally important across their range. And they're an excellent umbrella and flagship species. And anything we can fix in terms of threats for ground hornbills makes things safer for vultures, for secretary birds, for wild dogs, for cheetah. So, you know, I think they're really good species to try and fix a number of other issues. So in the South African context, this is what we're dealing with. So they do occur all the way up to southern Kenya, but we've got the blue is what we had, and the yellow is what we've got. And you can see clearly the outline of Kruger National Park. So that's a really clear indication that we are the problem. If we exclude us from the system, they're doing absolutely fine. Our recent analysis of our Kruger data shows that the group sizes are actually increasing over time. So one of the things we're doing is trying to gentlify this area so some of those youngsters can have safe space to disperse out of those groups and hopefully build that population up a little bit more. For the longest time, all of the research was done in Kruger National Park. Biologists like to work in national parks because it's nice there. But actually, and that was kind of our context for understanding ground hornbills. And then we started looking beyond the borders of protected areas, and we started work in southern KwaZulu-Natal. And there we found a population, another core population, almost as strong as Kruger, and that is purely because of cultural protection. So if you're a ground hornbill in South Africa, you would love to be born into Kruger onto Zulu-speaking land. And so we're doing, you know, we're trying to cover these areas more. We don't think this is fully representative of what's out there, but I think we're going to find more. The harder we look, the more we find. Because this is what is normal ground hornbill habitat across the range. It's living with people, in amongst homesteads, in amongst cattle. This is their natural habitat. And so all of our work, I mean, we do monitor protected areas, but our actual conservation work is trying to figure out how we can support them outside of protected areas. I don't know how much you know about ground hornbills, but in terms of social structure, you've got an alpha female and an alpha male. They are the only 2 who will breed in the group. We then have the rest of the group are young males. And their job is simply to defend the territory, feed her when she's in the nest, and when her chick hatches, feed the chick as well. So they don't take part in breeding at all. So if you're in Kruger National Park and you see a group of 9, still only one breeding female. So doesn't matter how big the group is, still only one breeding female. Whoops, sorry, I'm getting confused by this. The young females are kicked out of the group when they're about 11 months of age. So they have to somehow survive by themselves. They don't have the support of the group. They don't have all those extra eyes looking out for predators. And somehow they have to survive until they're about 8 or 9 when they're biologically ready to breed. And even if they're biologically ready to breed, they're waiting for an alpha position to become available for them to move into. So to be a female ground hornbill is tough to start with, but if you can hack it until breeding age and you can find that queen position, then you've got your king to look after you and you've got your army to protect you. But it's, yeah, as a young female ground hornbill, life's tough. Increasingly, we're starting to find blue males in the population, and we don't really understand what this is. Did we just get the coloration wrong? Did we just declare the coloration wrong between males and females? Or is there something going on? So we've had a look at testosterone, because the suggestion was it must be something endocrine related. But it's the only thing we discovered through that analysis is that female ground hornbills have more testosterone than female birds usually do. So again, ground hornbills throwing curveballs. This NB is to remind me, these youngsters, especially when they're young, are absolutely thick. They don't know how to catch things properly. They don't know how to kill a black mamba. They don't know how to kill a puff adder. They don't know how to kill a tortoise. They don't know where to sleep safely. And so they need the older, more experienced birds in the group to teach them that. It's about 5 years of learning before they're safe to go out into the world on their own. So if we lose these older, more experienced mentors in a group, this lot hasn't got a chance of survival. So the group unit is almost more important than the individuals in a group. This is some of the data from the APNR. They have really quite fixed territories. I don't know what's happened with the coloration there. There's a little bit of overlap in territories during the non-breeding season. But really those territories are quite firm, and they could even be things on the landscape. It could be a drainage line, a ridge of mountains. You know, they're quite defined areas on a landscape. And then the young females, as I said, 92% of them disperse at 11 months. And generally the young girls move about 4 territories away from home, or settle 4 territories away from home. The young males, we've got a tattooed bird that my dad tattooed 29 years ago now. And he's still in his natal group and he's still a helper. You know, so they disperse anything from 5 years until who knows when. With a tattoo artist on the facial skin here. And so 45 months on average, but really it could be any length of time. And they move next door. The boys are not very adventurous at all. And so clearly the problem is mostly us, but it's also a little bit them. Some of the key threats that we're facing, the big ones are secondary poisoning. Farmers still putting out poison bait items for so-called pest species. Ground hornbills will never give up an opportunity for a free meal. So if they find a dead thing lying in the veld, they're absolutely going to eat that. So, you know, if there's poison bait out there, they will all come together. And what that means is we don't just lose a single individual, we lose an entire breeding unit. So poison's probably one of our biggest. And then the reason I'm in town is for that lead poisoning workshop, lead poisoning. And I'll discuss that a bit more later. Loss of nests. Ground hornbills can't build nests. They need to nest in a hollow in a tree. And we're starting to lose those big trees in the landscape, whether it's elephant impact, flooding, fires, wind, increased storms. And as we lose those, and ground hornbills, because they live so long, if they lose their nest, they're quite happy to plod on for another 10, 15 years. They're not going to leave to go and find another nest. They just stop breeding. So the nest thing is really, really important. Electrocution. Ground hornbills love to sleep on big open structures, and unfortunately in South Africa, and I assume here with Nampower, we provide these perfect big open structures. The problem is with transformer boxes, they roost on them. If there's anything like a wasp nest or something, they poke around to see what's going on, and with that long bill and those big wings, they're absolutely likely to touch 2 live wires. So not so much power lines. They've got very good eyesight. They're very able flyers, so we don't get collisions, but it's the transformer boxes. Persecution. Ground hornbills are highly territorial, and when they see the reflection in a shiny surface, it's an enemy in their territory. They're to steal their wife, steal their nest, steal their territory, and so they fight back. And we've got, I mean, we had one incident in northern Limpopo in Bloberg. The birds broke 600 window panes in a morning. So classical human-wildlife conflict. Even the most conservation-minded farmer, by the time he's replaced all of his windows 4 or 5 times, is going to get hurtful and do something about it. And so, yeah, they don't make good neighbors generally. And then trade. We see a little bit of trade for belief-based use, but most of the trade that we see is for aviculture, not so much out of South Africa or Namibia, but certainly from Tanzania. So those are the us things. The them things is they just need a huge amount of time and a huge amount of space. They can live up to 70 years. They're big birds. They will only ever produce 1 chick per year, and that's assuming they could be bothered to breed every year. They reach sexual maturity when they're 10, but obviously they have to wait for that alpha position before they actually get to breed. They need at least 80 to 100 square kilometers per family. So you've got any number of land uses within that space. You know, it could be agriculture, game farming, communal land, who knows what's going on there. And, you know, can we guarantee that there aren't threats in any one of those areas? This extensive learning phase. But the good thing is if we can get them to 5 and we can remove all the people threats, then we should be able to get them to 70. The cooperative breeding and the group size. So really, time and space is what they get, what they need, and that's what we're unable to give them anymore in our fast-changing world. So the big picture for us is to first slow and then try and reverse the decline. So as a project, we try and protect what we have, we try and fix the threats that are out there, and then we try and put them back where they lost. We would like to do a few other things with the project. We'd like it to be a launch pad for young African conservationists. We definitely want to share both our wins and our losses with all range states. You know, this project's been going since 1999. We've made a lot of mistakes. You know, there's no textbook for this. So we'd like to make sure that no one else is making the same mistakes and that the stuff that has worked can be rolled out quite quickly. And then any threat that we fix for ground hornbills is obviously going to help a bunch of other species. So these are sort of the secondary goals of the project. So we work according to 6 multidisciplinary pillars. So the first is monitor. What do we have and where? Mitigate, trying to fix all those threats. Restore through reintroduction, restoration, artificial nests. Community, I mean, that really is the thread that binds it all because they're territorial. Whoever is sharing that land has to be their custodians. You know, it needs to be, this group needs to be supported by these people. This group needs to be supported by these people. So the awareness stuff is really important in the work that we do. Research, trying to make sure that everything we do is based on sound science. You know, the stuff we do today, we're only going to see the results in 10, 15 years. And so we really need to try and make sure that we're making smart decisions for them now because, you know, I don't want to get to 60 and realize I've made a really bad decision for them. And then improve. You know, we want to do the best for these birds, but also for our team and the communities that we work in. So monitor's the first one. In South Africa, the current demographics of who supplies bird distribution data is this. And this doesn't necessarily like to go into all the places where ground hornbills are. And as a consequence, we have quite a skew in the distribution records in the Atlas data. So to try and counter that, we need to enlist more citizen scientists. It's great to have the birding people on board, but actually they don't cover the areas where ground hornbills are necessarily. And so now through these WhatsApp groups, we've got 86 WhatsApp groups now. We've got taxi drivers, bus drivers, school principals, fire truck drivers, kids, as part of our scientist corps. Yes. not in Windhoek, but when we go up to Babwata. Do you want to join that group? Cool. All right. So you can see the kind of data that we get. So we always get a location point, we get a group size. We're not that interested in the group size because we know it's one breeding female. What we're interested in is group persistence. But these groups have been amazing, and we've got groups in Namibia now. If you'd like to join, speak to Holger. Everything, obviously, we've got to have some sort of base to work off. So we tried to collate as much of the data as we had, mostly through the SABAP Atlas data. And we had 621 pentads. If you take the average group size, that gives us about 2,000 individuals. So we tried to work out how can we get as much data at a national scale that is not going to cost a fortune, anyone can report, and we still kind of get a feel for what's happening at a national scale. So we use this color coding system, and we run over a 4-year cycle. And the reason we do that is because we can age ground hornbills up to about the age of 5. So if you send me a picture of a group, I can tell the age of those individuals, therefore which years they successfully bred. So we've run over this 4-year system. So for example, in pentad A, if the group is seen once in the pentad in each year, that stays green. Because they're so naturally low density occurring, if we skip a year, or skip 2 years even, but they're seen in the 4th year, it stays green. But if they're seen in the 1st year, never seen again, that then becomes a red square, which is an indication to us either we need to put more effort in or there might be a problem there. So at the end of the 4 years, we'll kind of get a map like this. All good green. Oh, don't know what's happening there. Maybe we would need to put a bit of effort there. A single red, not the end of the world. If these guys are all breeding fine, they can recolonize that area. But what is happening here? You know, so then we can target our resources to try and understand what's going on the ground. So we have posters like this up at Kruger and all over the country. And, you know, we probably get about 1,000 data points a month from citizen scientists. And we've got about 6,000 citizen scientists on board, which is really cool. So over this time, we've found 346 new pentads. So it's 50% over and above our old data. So we just had to look harder. We just had to look in places where we hadn't looked for them before. Even COVID year, we had a good sample, but slowly that's dropping. I don't have the 23 data yet. But you know, eventually we should reach a stage where we're not getting any more pentads, and then we know we've got pretty good coverage of what we're doing. So this is kind of what that data looks like. Each star is a new pentad within that month. We're able to then report back to all these citizen scientists and give them information. We do little did you knows and, you know, try for the data coming in, we'd like to be able to give something back. In each month, whichever group supplies the most data, they get a little sightings champion. Yeah, but it engages people. When someone posts on a WhatsApp group, if you saw birds yesterday and forgot to report, it's a little memory jolt to remind you to put your birds down. Because of the images that we get in through this, we can assess things like juvenile mortality. This nest was not successful. Assess juvenile survival. This chick made it to this age despite its diet. We get an idea of different habitat uses and behaviors. We've had beautiful pictures of them grooming wild impala. I mean, we know that they do that for cattle and warthogs in some places, but you know, we start to build a bit of an interesting insight into how they go about their daily lives. In mealie fields at the base of the Drakensberg, we've even had them on the beach in the Transkei with cattle behind them. You know, so it's really nice to see where they can live and thrive. It helps us find new nests with a resighting. So there's an example of the tattoos. Between the tattoos and the rings, we can start getting a handle on lifespan and how they do disperse from the groups. We can monitor nest activity. I don't need to drive to this nest to know that this group is probably going to have a go at breeding this year. And then within that, obviously that gives us sort of a broad strokes of what's happening in the country. But then we try and do stratified subsampling. So we look at commercial farmland, protected areas, communal grazing areas, and mixed mosaic, which could be sugarcane, timber, with a bit of grassland in between. so that with time, we're able to see how these different land uses impact their productivity and where they're doing better and where they're not doing as well. Within these stratified subsampling things, we can assess group and nest productivity. We can also, if necessary, harvest the second hatch chicks. Oh, whoa. I don't know what I did there. Okay. Let's try go backwards at speed. Wow. Okay. This is a tricky thing. So the next is we need to try and fix some of the problems out there. Some things we can fix, some we can't. This is one of the ones we can't. This female had an altercation with a porcupine. She didn't make it. That went through her lungs. This is a bird with lead toxicosis. I don't know how to. If I just press that. So this bird has somewhere found offal in the veldt with something that was shot with a lead bullet. Lead goes into the carcass, it shatters into small pieces. Hunters often leave the gut behind, often thinking they're doing a good thing for scavengers. But it takes about 1/4 of a grain of rice to poison a ground hornbill, so it really doesn't take a lot. And this is currently the biggest reason for failure in our reintroductions in South Africa. We're very lucky to have learned it, because obviously a bird like this will be predated in no time at all. So it's only through careful monitoring that we were even able to pick up that this is an issue. Sorry, this thing is finicky. Oh, I can't go backwards. There we are. You know, so this is an X-ray of a ground hornbill. Those are tiny lead pellets in there. For ground hornbills, 4 is considered risky. And this bird is sitting at 232. It did survive after fulculation treatment, but that's only because we were able to find it. This bird we found having seizures. So, you know, with lead, there's very, very mild effects, mild, but still really not good for the species. It impacts cognitive ability, it impacts reproductive ability. So even though you're seeing ground hornbills walking around, are they operating at 30% or are they operating at 100%? You know, but we only really know that it's lead issues when we pick up a convulsing bird. In South Africa, the more we look, the more we find. The St. Lucia crocodiles, they found that they weren't breeding at all. They started doing autopsies. And they found inside the guts of these crocodiles fishing sinkers, because they go along the bottom picking up stones to help them digest, also fishing sinkers. One of the crocodiles had the highest blood level concentration of any animal measured anywhere in the world. It was one of the St. Lucia crocodiles. I don't know off by heart because I have a terrible memory, but it was in the thousands. You know, how that animal is even still alive, but it's not surprising that they're not breeding. So in South Africa, St. Lucia, they're trying to shut down fishing altogether, because otherwise they're going to lose all of their crocs. So the workshop that we were at, we have a South African led task team that I'm a member of, and then Namibia, you have a Namibian, what are you, the working group, led working group, yeah. So we've been developing some materials to try and get the message out, but I don't think people are really going to care about vultures and ground hornbills, but they really will care about their children. Well, I hope they will. Initially with our messaging, we were kind of like, lead is harmful to the environment. And then we realized that actually that's just not good enough in terms of messaging. Lead is a neurotoxin is really the message. You know, lead, arsenic, they're all the same. And we realized that actually, unless we really emphasize the impacts on us, we're not going to see the change that we need to try and do anything different for ground hornbills and vultures. Loss of libido in men, lower IQ, few things to think about. Then in terms of nests, the ground hornbills take very well to artificial nests. The big concern for us, though, is with rising temperatures, when we have these heat waves of 42, 43 degrees for a couple of days in a row, we're starting to see embryo death. So anything we do in designing artificial nests, we need to make sure our nests are as cool as possible. And this was one of our earlier bad designs. Thankfully, they still work. They're fledging chicks, probably because it's in a leafy tree. But we realized when we analyzed our data, we put little eye buttons that measures temperature and humidity. When we looked at that data, and we've gone through the literature, no other artificial nests have taken that into account either, is the temperature of the incubating female. So we all test our nests empty, and we're like, oh, this is a great material. Let's build a nest of that. And all we'd really done is made a cooler box. And if you put a hot KFC bucket in a cooler box, it's going to stay warm. So although they love these nests, they're using them, we need to go back to the drawing board and do a much better job, because that may be fine now, but it's not going to be fine in 5 to 10 years. So that's something we're working on. So this is last year's chick. Generally, the previous 1 or 2 chicks are absolutely useless at supporting. You know, he's standing around making all the right noises, but he's not actually doing anything. And what we found is it's the experience of the older birds that impacts productivity, not group size. We assumed it must be group size. If you've got 9 helpers, you know, surely that's a better group, but it's not. It comes down to the experience of the elder birds. This is a very sweet video. This is a youngster sleeping in one of our nests. How do I make that go? Snoring away. I'm sure you see yourselves in this as you doze off for a nap. So with the new design of nests, you know, we're really trying to make sure air can get through, the hot air can get out. We're hosting a big global artificial nest review workshop, either end of this year or early next year. And we're bringing everyone together who's ever built an artificial nest for a hornbill to try and learn from everyone's experiences. You know, a lot of people are getting a lot of things right, but I don't think any of us are getting it all right. So I think if we bring everyone together, we should be able to, for all hornbill species, provide better artificial nests. A lot of the design things, you know, initially we built those big dinosaur eggs, but with the Namibian project, we had to transport 20 up here. So we started looking at designs that we could make flat pack nests like that fold up, that can be put on a trailer. There's a lot of logistics, but also we've got to make sure that at the end of the day, it's still the best nest for the birds. Sometimes this happens. Unsuccessful nesting. And I mean, nest predation is natural, but I don't know if we've got enough birds in some areas that we can support KFC every year. What we have found is leopards, once they find a nest, at that time of year, they will always come back and just check the nest. You know, creatures of habits. I had a lacquer-free meal there last year. Let me check it out this year. So we're trying to figure out a few things. I don't know if they'll work. So this is one of the things we're trying, working with the industrial design department at TUT. Yeah, I don't know. We're in the experimental phase, and we're still in the thinking phase as to whether this is something we want to carry on with. Poison. We lost 2 birds at a captive facility in Nelspruit. Some of our captive breeding birds. One of the staff was pissed off with the owner. This is fly poison that can be bought at any taxi rank. It's unlabeled. No idea what it is. You spray it on a cloth to kill flies. And these birds were dead within 30 seconds. So there's a court case pending on that. But there's a lot of pesticides out there. I'm sure you know that from vultures, from, yeah, a bunch of stuff. How we clean that up, I don't know. That's a bigger problem than I know how to wrap my head around. Right, next is restore. So they're hideous, I know. So ground hornbills lay generally 2 eggs. The first egg is laid 5 or 6 days before the second egg. So obviously it hatches 5 or 6 days before the second egg. First chick starts growing, parents feed it. By the time number 2 hatches, the parents can decide if number 1 is good and strong, then they rear number 1. If number 2 sorry, don't have enough hands. If there's something wrong with number one, then they will rear number two. If not, then they just neglect number two. So it dies of generally dehydration. Sometimes the mother will swallow it, free food. So over the years, we figured out that we can take these second hatch chicks, and they're basically a free source for reintroductions. So we have a specialized rearing center. We have to get them within 2 or 3 days of hatch. Otherwise, there may be organ damage from dehydration. And so these ugly little things become these ugly little things. What? And for the longest time, we were using a number of institutions in South Africa, our zoos, our bird parks, who were doing the rearing, but they all had very different facilities. And we had a reintroduction expert come out from Mauritius, Carl Jones, and he said, what you've got is apples, pears, plums, and peaches. And so you'll never actually know how you're doing on the reintroduction side until you can standardize your rearing. So we built a center, which was called the Baobab. Picture this and then take it into the next slide. This is what we dreamt it would look like. It's just a brick column. But this is a little overview of that center. Can I turn my volume up? No. Okay. It's full. Is it not going through that? Okay, sorry. So it wasn't quite finished when this filming was done. So this is the baobab. These are the artificial nests on the outside. And these aviaries have foster groups. So when we bring the chicks from the wild, they go into these top aviaries. So the hand rearers are busy on the inside, but actually all they're interacting with is the foster groups on the outside. They then fledge into these groups, and from there, we then put them into bush schools because they have to learn all those skills from the experienced mentors. This is some of last year's fledge. Our current chicks are about 20 days from fledging now. And this is one of the reintroductions that we did last year. There's a nest in the tree here. It's been one of the easiest reintroductions. They're not always like this, but the birds immediately started spending all their time around the nest. They didn't breed, but they bonded and they're doing their thing. Right, so then trying to get everyone on the same page in terms of ground hornbills. When it was the BirdLife Bird of the Year with BirdLife, we produced a number of materials. We have Vusa, the ground hornbill guardian, which tells the story of a little boy, Vusa, who goes walking with his dog, meets a ground hornbill, and they go on a bit of a journey together. And then we also produced a little animation, and this is for kids to share on their phones. No way we can up the volume.
In a small village, there lived a clever little girl called Knowledge. Grandfather said goodnight. She asked him why the rains had not come. The grandfather said that many years ago, there were these giant birds called ground hornbill, also known as the thunder or rain bird, that had a magnificent call that would often be followed by good rain. But he hadn't seen one in many years. Maybe that is why there was no rain. The young girl fell into a deep sleep and was startled by a loud sound. It was the ground hornbill. The giant bird greeted her by name and asked if she could help him. He would return to the village to call for the rain. As the two of them walked, the giant thunderbirds at most of the trees they nested in had been cut down, forcing them to leave. He said that they only needed one tree per family. The little girl said that she would ask the villagers to protect those specific trees. Thank you, said the bird. The few that had stayed only had strange-looking trees to roost on. The giant bird pointed to an electricity post, but these trees had often hurt or electrocuted them, forcing their families to leave too. As they continued, Knowledge jumped with fright as she saw a large papa on the bank. The bird marched past her and one step to its head, killed it, and then ate it. She was so grateful as snakes terrified her and her family. The giant bird pointed at a dead rat lying in a field and was about to eat it when the little girl said, "No, it was probably poisoned, and it would kill him if he ate it." Some farmers still use poison to keep predators or rats away from their livestock or food. The little girl said she would discuss alternatives with her village, like good crows, herd dogs, or cats to keep away predators and rats. "Thank you," said the bird as he hopped excitedly along. The bird then walked past the window and immediately began to attack it. The little girl quickly covered the window with a blanket, and he instantly stopped. "Why did you do that?" she asked. The bird said he had seen another ground hornbill in the window and needed to defend his territory, nest, and wife. While chuckling to herself, she covered some of the lower windows so he would not break them. As they passed a particular house, he pointed and said some men from that house had tried to catch and kill him, believing that if they did, they would steal his great voice and make themselves more powerful. The little girl thought for a moment and said that the voice of one man is not as important as the voice of a bird that brings the rain and can eat dangerous snakes. "I will tell my people of all these dangers you face. I think we can make our village safe for you to return. And hopefully, if you are happy and safe, also call the rain." The bird began to flap excitedly and called loudly. The sound of thunder echoed through the air, and the little girl smiled. She promised the ground hornbill that she would share all she had learned with her people when she awoke. I think they will listen. After all, her name was Knowledge.
So that was super fun, but equally I got to spend a day in studio with John Carney, the famous South African actor. So that for me was an absolute highlight. Here from Namibia, some of the work that we did, what is it, a year and a half ago, I guess. When we were working in Babwata, there's actually a healing song, and you need to call on ground hornbills to connect yourself to your ancestors when you need healing. It's quite long, but I'll just give you a bit of a sneak peek. And then we always try and do things that kids can take home and maybe continue the discussion at home. So we have masks and mobiles, and it's fun when we do some of the schools and you see all these tiny little hornbills walking home over the hills, flocks and flocks of them. Right, then in terms of research, so we had this French researcher, Samara Danel. She came out to the Baobab, and we tried to, do all the same cognitive experiments that they do on dolphins and gorillas and elephants and whatever else to try and assess how intelligent they are. Turns out ground hornbills are incredibly smart, up there with crows and the smartest parrots. So they are very smart, which is why I don't know why they're endangered. A lot of veterinary stuff. Ground hornbills do get themselves into trouble. So obviously the lead toxicosis is an issue. They are susceptible to Newcastle's disease. So we've developed a vaccine that we can feed to the reintroduced birds to make sure they have some sort of immunity when they go out. We tried to see if we could do drugging on them because it makes it easier for management. I had a dream that we could inject the drug into a mouse. We called it the Sleepy Mouse Project. We could find a group, throw the sleepy mouse out, they'd eat it, go to sleep, we'd pick them up, do what we needed, wake them up. That wasn't the case at all. The drugs worked really well. We did gut transit trials to understand how fast food goes through a ground hornbill gut. It takes 1 hour. And the way you do these gut transit trials is you take various bait items, so a day-old chick or a mouse, and then you stuff it full of glitter of different colors, and then you feed it to them, and then you time until you see gold poo or silver poo or blue poo. So that's how you do gut transit trials in birds. But basically it takes an hour. And so we had all the right drugs, and we used zoo birds at Pretoria Zoo, and they all went down perfectly. And we thought, great experiment. We woke everyone up. Everyone woke up perfectly. We put them back in the individual cages. And 18 hours later, all of them re-knocked again. So if the vets hadn't been observant, those birds would have been in real trouble. So that was an epic failure. But it's good to share failures, as epic as that. And then we've got a chapter in Fowler's on ground hornbill medicine. In terms of physiology and ecology, there's some stuff about ground hornbills that we would never have learned following them in the wild. You know, it just happened to be there in a snapshot. We have reports of them kidnapping youngsters from other groups. You know, if your army's a little bit small, take someone from next door, no problem. This was trying to understand that whole blue male situation. They lose all their heat through their bill and through that colored skin. So we now know how they offload heat. And then we looked at the reintroductions. There's a lot more needing to be done on the conservation side. We just haven't had time to sit down and analyze and write up. Right, then in terms of improvement, conservation planning is one of the things we try and do. You know, just try and think about clearly what are the issues, and then really what can we do that's actually feasible. So I guess it's about 2 years now. This is the historic records for ground hornbills from the old atlas for Namibia. And so my colleague Jared and I came, and on this area here, we actually did different workshops, village by village, through Mabula National Park. So we tried to understand where the birds were within each village's area. So where were people seeing them? What did they think about them? What did they think the issues were? And what did they think could be done about it? So we went village by village. Through that process, I learned a huge amount, one of which is that the cultural beliefs around ground hornbills, Bantu-speaking people have similar beliefs. There's nuances. But by the time you get to the San, they're completely different belief structures about the birds, and I found that really fascinating. I also learned how to kill my partner using a ground hornbill. So there's a lot of stuff to learn out there. I'm not sharing. By the end of that, we then did that big workshop in Katima that Holger spoke of. We had 3 days with this crowd to try and figure out what we could do. Trying to work out, what do we need to do in terms of awareness, in terms of each of the threats that came up through the discussions. And at the end of that, this is Nova, who's leading the charge for the ministry. We have a Namibian Species Action Plan. It's sitting with the ministry now. Kenneth reckons it'll be through by the end of March. So we're nearly there in the paperwork. But in the interim, what that did was catalyze funding from WWF to get some of the work started. And so we've installed 20 artificial nests in Mabula. This is my Nando, who can do anything, anytime, regardless. And we had 8 community monitors trained. So we went through any aspect of monitoring. This is learning how to install camera traps properly. And so this is the team that is now monitoring the ground hornbills on the ground. But quite honestly, they need all the help they can get. And this is a plea for help. This video is a chick fledging from its nest for the first time. That is a video that lives in my head rent-free. It's fine. It's pretty standard for ground hornbills leaving the nest, it turns out. All right, so I'd like to thank you for your time, love, and support. And if you need to get hold of us for any reason, thank you. I guess I ask, are there any questions? Bored to death. Don't know, still trying to work that out. A lot less than, thank you. A lot less than you should have. So on that map, north of Etosha, we found very few instances of groups. Babata still seems to be okay, especially Buffalo core side, Quando core side. I'm worried about those fires ripping through the middle. That doesn't look like great habitat, but the monitoring now, we should, through the next 3 years. So please, anytime you see a ground hornbill or anyone tells you you saw a ground hornbill, we have a WhatsApp reporting line, or send it to Holger or me, or, so every dot on a map is really valuable for us.
Yeah, I think the original assessment was what, 26% of the population is left of what we had many years ago.
But I'm hoping if we look harder, like we did in South Africa, we'll find more. They're seasonal. They usually wait for the first big rains of the season. That kind of kicks them into going. So I guess by the time the chick comes out, there's lots of invertebrates around. So the rains, and so I don't know what's happening this year. Your rains haven't been great. So Holger's going to go and check the camera traps at the end of March, and we'll see if anyone got stuck into those nests. By the sounds of it, the rain hasn't been good enough. So it would be thrilling if they did, but yeah, we'll see. But, yeah. Yeah. Hmm. No, so, it seems that the sex hatch ratio is 50-50. So, if you've got 2 girls in a row, they're going to leave early. If you've got a couple of boys in a row, they're going to hang around. So it really just depends on whether the chicks are male or female as to the group size. Sure. No, too dry. Yeah, in some places. So they need big trees to nest in and roost in. And yeah, not a huge amount in Etosha. They also used to be all around Grootfontein, and they're totally gone from there. But the bush encroachment there, there's no ways they could be persisting there, even if there were enough big trees. It's at Loskop Dam. So we've got a partnership with Mpumalanga Parks Board. And so that's based there. And then Carl's based on the Lowveld. So we're a bit spread out. Thank goodness for Zoom. Yeah. There was. What do you. Predators on the chicks? None. They will eat a snake that comes into the nest. Genets and leopards, much more of an issue. Occasionally baboons, but mostly genets and leopards. Yeah. Mm-hmm. We don't know yet. So we don't know if there are enough nests with the fires in that area. Are there enough big trees in those areas? And we don't know. They will only move to our nests if they don't have a nest. They will always choose a good natural nest over our nest. So if they've got a nest, they won't move to ours. And so we'll monitor, and if needs be, move.
Yeah, just as a comment on at that workshop that we had in Katima, we had members from all the communities, all the conservancies, whatever else, and we asked them if they've ever seen a natural ground hornbill nest. And there wasn't one person that had seen a ground hornbill nest in that entire northeastern strip.
But one of our monitors has already found a natural nest, and Holger's going to go check it. Question at the back? So if we can get rid of use of lead ammunition on 100 square kilometers, any vulture that comes in there is safe from leads. If we can fix poisoning in this area, it's good for them. you know, so, and hopefully any conservation awareness about one species hopefully leads to a little bit of conservation awareness for the other things going on. Yeah. Uh-oh. Mm. Not always. So we have a soft release aviary. So we put them into that. We give them about a month to settle. The outside group can then interact through the fence, and we watch those interactions. Once they start bringing food and trying to feed the inside bird, then it looks good. Sometimes they just spend all day terrorizing that bird, and then we know that's unlikely to move that one out, try another one. Not always. There was an amazing quote somewhere about reintroductions. You can prepare the stage, you can give the actors their lines, but you don't actually know how the play is going to go. And every time we release, that's why I said that one from last year was just blissfully easy. We've had some horrors. But yeah, we keep learning, and each time we do a little bit better. Kasani. Kasani doing elephant things, not ground hornbill things.
Destroy the trees for ground hornbill.
Yeah. Mm. Mm. Silly you. We could have used that. So I might send Holger back to try and help you put a dot on a map. I'm busy writing up the Botswana plan now, and then BirdLife International is keen to do a regional plan. So we're probably going to try and do one for the whole range. But yeah, any information, anytime, any ideas, anytime. Thanks. Oh, yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah. No. No. So unfortunately, we also, for the workshop, we couldn't get very many people from that region, but just from that trip that we did, that's pretty much what we found is across that entire region. They were there, people didn't really like them, and they weren't really there anymore. The further east you go, the more people value them, like them, and they're more birds. So, you know, that's cultural perception is important as to whether they're going to stay or go. What would you suggest? Awareness. Okay. Are you offering to kickstart? Sure. Okay. Thank you. And some places don't hunt them for food because they say they smell bad and taste bad. So very much depends where you are. Yeah. Or poisonous, venomous because they eat snakes. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Thanks.